Studio One 4.6 was just released a couple of days, so in this video we're going to take a look at a few of the features. Now I've actually got the release notes here, so we're just going to start from the top and work our way down. We're not going to cover every single thing, but most of these we're going to take a look at within Studio One itself. And one of the most important things up at the very top here, I've got this highlighted. It's important for you guys who are on these older operating systems. So if you're using Windows 7 or 8, or you're working on the Mac and you're using 10.11 El Capitan or 10.12 Sierra, these will no longer be supported after version 4.6. So this is something that you're going to want to take special note of and figure out what you're going to do about that. But just know that that's an important thing to consider. And then let's just move on to some of the new features and improvements. And we're just going to start from the top here. So Empire, we're on the 3rd generation. So let's come to Studio One. And here I've actually got a basic loop. So let's hear how this sounds now. Okay, so I'm going to come to the Effects tab within the browser. Let's come to Presonus, and here is the new Empire. So I'm just going to click, hold, and drag that onto our track with that guitar loop. Let's close out the browser, and I'm going to play this back again just to hear how this sounds by default after bringing it in. Okay, and we actually have a variety of plugins here, or presets rather. We've got an experimental folder. Okay, so I'm going to change that back to the default, and let's go ahead and stop playback. Now, I'm not a guitar player, but this sounds pretty good to me. I have worked with the Empire before on a few occasions, and it does seem to be more improved. I know the interface, the GUI itself, looks a hell of a lot better, more modern and up to date. So that's pretty cool, but let's just start from the top and work our way across and take a look at all of the different parameters and features that are within this. So in the upper left, we have an input control. With this dial here, we can control our input level. We have some meters here. And let's skip ahead here because we can show and hide the stage, as Presonus calls it here. And when we click on the Presonus logo, we can change the background for our stage like so, just by repeatedly clicking. And I'm just going to take this back to the default blank space there. And so we can show and hide the stage with that top bar. With the bottom bar, we can show and hide our pedal board down at the bottom there. Now, next we can choose the particular amp that we'd like to work with. So if we click on the name here, then we're taken to a browser where we can see the different models that we can choose from. And as we hover over each model, we can see a brief description over here in the left. So if I click once, then that's loaded up, and we have the controls that are available for the particular model that we've chosen in the center area here. And so we can actually come and make adjustments to all of the parameters here. So if I use the down arrow to change to this other amp, we can then come in and adjust. And even with these cables, these virtual 1/4-inch cables, we can click on the inputs to change where this cable is being routed. And that's going to allow us to achieve a different sound. And we're going to give a listen to some of these controls in just a minute. Next to that, we have the cabinet. And again, as we saw here, if we click on the name, then we can choose from a variety of different cabinets. So if I click once on this boutique, then that's loaded up. We can also use the up and down arrows to make selections as well. Okay, so next to that, we have some mic position controls. So when we click on this icon here, we can see mic A, B, and C. We can choose the positions of these, and by default, these are all going to be linked together. So as I turn mic A down, then mic B will be turned up. If I increase the level for mic C, then mic A and B will be taken down, relatively speaking. So we can see that these are going to be adjusted in relation to each other while we have this link button active. If I go ahead and disengage that, then we can come in and manually adjust these discreetly without the other ones being adjusted. Now we also have delay controls, and we can take this all the way up to essentially 3 millisecond delay if we'd like to include that within our sound to any particular mic. Then at the bottom we have mute controls, and then here to the right of that we have polarity, and we can choose between normal and inverted. So let's hide that panel, and next to that we actually have a tuner. So I'm going to go ahead and start this playback again. So when we have our signal coming in, we can make use of this tuner to make any adjustments. We can choose strobe. We can mute here. And then we have a calibration for our tuning. But I'm going to go ahead and hide that panel. And then finishing out to the right, we have output gain, which is going to be at 0 dB by default. And then we have level meters here where we can keep an eye on that to be sure that we're not clipping our signal going out. So I'm going to hide the stage to give us a bit more real estate to take a look at the pedal board. And by default, we're going to have this Tube Dreamer, the Chorus 1, and delay loaded up. But we can remove these at any time by right-clicking and then remove stomp. And you'll want to do that kind of where you see the title, the name at, because if we right click in some places, we're not going to have that. So clicking near the name or the title of these is going to allow you to remove that. Also, if we see the Tube Dreamer here, if we click on the down arrow, we can come to the selection area, choose this icon here, and that will remove it as well. If we come back to the down arrow and the selection area, then we can select the pedal that we'd like to add from there as well. Now, all the way to the left, we have a global bypass, and this is going to bypass all of our stomps when we have that active. And for each of the stomps, we do have individual power, so we can power on and off these individual pedals. And we have this device here, which is going to allow us to choose pre and post amp position for our pedals. So any pedal that's going to be to the left, those stomps are going to be before the amp. Anything to the right is going to be after the amp. Now we can adjust the position of this by click, hold, and dragging left or right. And we also have these vertical blue bars down at the bottom that we can click, hold, and drag left or right to change the position here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and play back our basic loop again, just for half a minute or so. And let's tweak some of these parameters on here. First, we do need to power on. That would be helpful, so we could do that down below. Let's take the output up just a little bit there. Power on our delay. Let's come to our level control and take that up. And again, we can come to the down arrow here. Make a selection. You can click, hold, and drag left or right to change the order of these. I'm going to load the reverb on here, and let's move that to the end. Scroll to see that. And again, we can adjust the controls up above. A lot of this is going to have to do with the input that we've chosen. Okay, and all of these controls, if I right click here, then we can actually add automation to the various parameters that are listed within Empire. So that can give you some more creative tones to your guitar as well, or whatever you'd like to use the Empire with. Okay, so let's then move on to the next item on the menu. Let's come to the top and remove that. Let's come back to the release notes, and the next thing that we have is the pedal board. Okay, so for this, I'm going to come to the instruments. Let's bring in a Mai Tai, and I'm going to initialize this Mai Tai. Let's see, this oscillator 1 is on a saw. Let's activate oscillator 2 and put that on a triangle. Let's turn on the character. Adjust our filter. So we do have an effects panel within the Mai Tai, and so if we come to effects B, we have, for instance, distortion, and we can activate that and put some drive on there and change the distortion type. But I'm going to go ahead and deactivate that because I just wanted to show that if we come to effects and let's scroll down to the pedal board, I'm going to close out the Mai Tai because we don't need that at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to drag the pedal board onto our Mai Tai track, and we can hear how that sounds right now at the moment. Let's go ahead and just start with a preset, and we'll choose Crumpy Cat. Okay, and again, we can come down below as we saw within Empire, and I'm going to click the down arrow, and let's bring in the chorus. And let's also bring in the modulation here. And if I bypass this, our original Mai Tai, I'll turn the bypass off. Okay, so this is something that this pedal board is something that you can experiment with anything that you'd like. It could be vocals, it could be synthesizer. Just bring in and play around with the different pedals and the settings here, and then you can really start to do some sound design and create some things that are not out there and are going to be tailored to your own music. So this is the pedal board device, and let's come up to the top and remove that out. I think we can Shift T to remove our Mai Tai out, and let's come back to the release notes and see where we are now. Okay, so we're now going to the browser, and there's updated user interface with new gallery view options, improved navigation, new dedicated shop tab. So let's take a look at these things here. Okay, so you may have already noticed when I was working in the browser here that we now have this breadcrumb view. So we can come up to the top here and say come to the effects, click on this arrow, and then navigate to different areas within our system here by clicking there. If I click on the pedal board, then we can see the preset folders that are contained within it and say come to the guitar section. So this is one of the new areas that is available within the browser. And we also have a toggle for tree mode. So if I click to turn that on or off, then we can activate the tree mode, and then we have a gallery view. So within our pedal board, we do have some preset folders here. So as long as we have this activated, then we're going to see this gallery view. So if I double click, then we can come in and see the individual presets. I can then click this back arrow to come up back to the main folder for the pedal board, and then click again to come back to the Presonus folder, and so on to come back to our effects. And if I come to the instruments tab, then we can see that we have the breadcrumb view here as well. And then over in the cloud section, this is going to be changed as well if we have that gallery view on. Also in the new shop tab, which I'm kind of on the fence about because I feel like this makes the tabs a little bit more cluttered. There was already quite a few here at the top already, but we now have this shop tab. And so if we wanted to say search for some new loops that we'd like to purchase, that we could come here. We can see we have the different vendors that sell the loops. So if I come to the Big Fish Audio, we can see there's one available there. Let's see. Let's try the Loop Masters. We've got quite a few here. And if I come to the left of the browser and let's expand that out, then this really gives you a better idea of the gallery view. So if I turn off the gallery view, then we can see we go back to that list view. But just know that the gallery view is only available if we have the tree mode active. If I disengage that, then we come back to kind of what it was before, the similar view before these changes were made. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about these changes that have been made to the browser. I don't think that I'll particularly be making that much use of these, but who knows, maybe I will. And so for instance, for the loops area, with the breadcrumb view, we can see where we are. We're in loops, MVP loops, acoustic, and piano. We can see that if I up above here, MVP loops, piano, and so on. And so we should be able to use these to navigate. But honestly, I feel like the left, right, and down arrows are going to be much more useful in what I tend to use. So if I use the right arrow, then I can open up that piano folder. If I press the down arrow, then I can navigate down. The up arrow, I can go up. If I use the left arrow, then I can collapse everything in here. So with the right arrow, I can expand folders out, open them up and expand out, up and down to navigate, and use the left arrow to close everything up. So for me, that's just much more convenient than potentially using the breadcrumb view, but maybe this will be useful for some of you guys. Okay, so what have we got next? Let's come back to the release notes. We've taken a look at the browser, and next we have patterns. So support for variable note lengths in melodic and drum patterns. We've got delay parameter per step, improved real-time recording, and independent saving and loading of pattern presets. So let's go ahead and take a look at all of these. I've got an impact loaded up. Let's close out the browser. And I do have a kit loaded here. Okay, we'll close that out. And let's, I'm gonna hold Alt and double click to add a pattern. Let's double click on that. And the first thing that we had was variable note lengths, I believe. So with this now, we're not restricted to one particular step when we're adding our notes in here. So if I were to come in and let's just say add some notes in here for a beat. Let's mute our guitar. Okay, now with some of these kits, there are loops that are included. And so if I were to fill in the first step here for that loop, you can hear it's not playing. Now, one thing I could do is open up the impact and we can see it here, and I can take it off of loop and change it to one shot. But that's going to introduce, it could work, but it's going to introduce some potential issues because of reasons that I won't go into in this video. But I mainly just want to show that we now can, instead of making adjustments to the impact, I'm going to click once to get rid of that. If I hold down Shift and then click and hold, I can then drag this out all the way to the end. So in this way, that loop is going to play back for the length of this 16-step pattern. So I'll go ahead and play this back. Okay, so this is what we have when they say variable length for the pattern. Now, let's come to the instruments, and I'm going to bring in a Mai Tai. Let's choose a pad. What does this sound like? Okay, so for this, if I hold Alt and double click to add a part here, double click. Now with this, you don't need to hold down Shift. You can simply click, hold, and drag. Click, hold, and drag. These are pretty low. Let me come back. Let me come up to the top. Okay, click, hold, and drag. If I go ahead and play this back. Okay, so you can see how we can do that just by click, hold, and drag. Now, if I try to click, hold, and drag to make it shorter, it just goes away. So if I hold Shift though, that's going to allow us to adjust the length from the end. And if you notice, when I hold Shift, the eraser is going to change to the arrow there, and I can then adjust the length of these notes. Okay, so that's adjusting the variable length within pattern, which is actually very, very cool. Now I'm going to close out the browse, edit. Let's Shift T to get rid of that Mai Tai and come back to our impact. One of the other things that was added is delay offset, a parameter for that, and we can see that here. And so this is going to adjust the timing of our notes here. So let's go ahead and play this back. First I need to unmute it, and I'm gonna get rid of that loop, and I'm actually gonna press C to turn on the click track. So we can hear our snare is right on that click track. If I come to delay and select that snare, by default we're going to be at 0%. If I raise this up, we're going to get a delay. Okay, if I lower it, it's going to hit early. Okay, so you can just tweak the percentage to be the offset that you would like to have for the particular snare or kick or whatever sound that you're working with. Okay, so that's one of the other things that was added to patterns. And one of the other things was independent saving and loading of pattern presets. So if I've got this pattern, if I've created a really awesome pattern, I'd like to save it to use it with other kits in the future. Where's a hat in here? We'll just add some claps along with those snares. And then put this awful sounding hat in here as well. Let's play that back. Okay, so say we want to keep this terrible pattern and use it with other kits in the future. One thing that we could do, or what we can do, is come to the inspector, the pattern inspector, by clicking the I here, and we now have store and load. So if we click on store, this is going to allow us to save that pattern. So I'll just call this new pattern and tab to the description. I'll just call this test. We can choose a subfolder if we'd like. I'm just going to click OK and close out the editor. Let's delete that pattern out and hold Alt, double click to add a new pattern. a blank pattern, double click, we can see nothing is here. That is empty. If I come to load, here is that pattern that I labeled new pattern. And once I choose that, then that pattern that I created is now loaded up. So if I come back to the beginning, we can hear that super amazing pattern. Now, you can also find these within the browser. So if I come to Browse and Files, and then choose Files up at the top, Studio One, and Presets, User Presets, Patterns, here is our new pattern that I created. So you can access them here as well if you'd like to manage them. For instance, I don't want to keep this thing. So I'm going to right click and delete that out. All right, let's move on to the next item in line. We've taken a look at the browser patterns, then we have convert instrument part to pattern option. And this is something a lot of people have left comments asking me if this was possible, and it wasn't. So I think this is going to make a lot of people happy. Convert instrument part to pattern. So we actually have a pattern here, and if you didn't know, we can right click on that, come to instrument parts here at the bottom, and convert that pattern to a part. So now when I double click on this, we bring up the drum editor because we're now working with a MIDI part. If I were to delete that out, double click to add a part, we know we're working with a MIDI part because it doesn't say pattern here. And if I double click, we bring up the drum editor. Okay, so if I were to add a basic beat in here, I'm going to change the quantize to eighth notes. Okay, so if I play this back, okay, so we have a very basic and boring, awfully boring beat that we've created in our MIDI part. If I close out the editor, we can now right click, come to instrument parts, and we have convert part to pattern. So I'll select that. And then now when I double click, we are taken to the pattern editor. And if you notice that the blocks here have already adjusted in size to match what we created in our MIDI part. And again, we can just click with the eraser tool to delete that out. We can also hold down Shift to bring up the double arrows there and adjust the length of this like so. Okay, I'm going to close out the editor. And what do we have next? New podcast, production song template, and custom podcast macro page. So these we won't spend a lot of time on. So as far as the macro is concerned, if we come to the macro manager, by default, that's going to be on global. But if we click on this down arrow, we can see we have a page for podcasting controls. And for the template, if we come to start, create a new song, we could see we've got podcast production here. Okay, but I'm not going to create that, so I'll cancel out. We then have improved tempo matching for loops, and apparently there were people that were having issues with the tempo not quite matching up when they brought loops in. I never really experienced that problem, although I don't work with loops that much, although I do work with them, but just not on a regular basis. But apparently there has been improvements made with that. So if you have been experiencing issues with the tempos not quite matching up with the loops that you bring into your song, that should be corrected. We've got improved copy paste editing of arranger sections. Automation bracket tool now also works for multi-selection. So actually I have, let's see, I have some automation here. Automation bracket tool, I've not heard of that until this release notes. So I'm thinking they mean the trim tool. I hope so. If someone else, if you know what they're referring to, please let me know. But when we do have automation and we come to the top, we have the trim tool, and then we can make an adjustment, and that's going to affect the area directly below and in between our automation points. If I click, hold, and drag and select a range, we can then adjust all that are selected within that range. So I believe that this is what they're referring to with that feature. Okay, coming back. Gallery view for Fat Channel XT. I believe we already saw that. We've taken a look at the gallery view. So any VST instrument or effect that has a folder, then we're going to be able to see a gallery view as long as we have that active. Increase mouse target for fades, for cases when handles overlap. So if you've got handles that are all close together and bunched together, this is going to be a bit more sensitive, so you don't have to fiddle around as much to make the adjustments you'd like to make. Audio batch converter, I don't have that, so we can't take a look at that. I also don't have the Presonus XT editor, but real-time stretching support has been added. And lastly, we have new commands that we can use with shortcut keys. So select muted tracks. Let's see, if I come to Studio One, keyboard shortcuts, select muted tracks, we can see that that's available, so we can select that and then enter a key or set of keys to use with this new command. And what else do we have? Invert track selection. I won't go through all of these. Okay, but we can see that here. Again, we can select and then enter a key or set of keys to use as shortcut keys to invoke this command. So this list here are the new ones that are available that we can work with within our shortcuts menu. All right, so this has been a look at some of the new features. There's some cool things in here, and if you guys have any questions about anything that is included in this release, or there's any other tutorials you'd like to see, go ahead and leave a comment below. If the tutorials have been helpful for you, then there's a couple ways you can support the channel in the description, so take a look there if you'd like to show your support. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next TUT. There's going to be some more stuff for Falcon and Studio One coming up in the next few days. All right, thanks for watching.